Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Director Ash, for being here. I want to just get my head around this controversy, this tempest that we're dealing with here today. My understanding is you provided an awful lot of documents to this committee by way of a FOIA request as a courtesy. The Chair acknowledged in his letter to you that that courtesy production of documents had occurred, correct?
Correct.
There was redaction in those, as is appropriate in response to a FOIA request. And then on March 11th, the subpoena was issued. And my understanding, and there were all sorts of new materials requested in that subpoena that went beyond, well beyond the scope of the FOIA request, correct?
That is correct. And in particular, the law enforcement documents that I mentioned in my oral statement were completely new. That was a completely new request and a significant request by the committee.
So you had the task of not only determining which of the redactions in the appropriately redacted FOIA documents may or may not need to continue to be redacted, but you also had to assess these additional requests in the subpoena and assess your ability to comply with those. And that was by way of a March 11th subpoena. The deadline for production was March 24th. So you were given 13 days to do all that. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Would you like to speak to perhaps speak to the burden that imposed upon you and your agency?
Yes, as I said, I think that it's physically impossible for me to comply with the subpoena. So, you know, the previous question about contempt, I feel like I have no way to meet the committee's expectations. And what I would suggest is that we sit down with the committee and find a reasonable pathway forward. And rather than exchanging letters and subpoenas, that we sit down eyeball to eyeball as good public servants and find a way forward to get the committee the information that it needs. But with this subpoena, and especially a subpoena that gives us 2 weeks and raises substantial new issues, we simply can't comply.
I will just say that manner of collaborative problem solving and information sharing would be really refreshing if it was reciprocated by the committee, and I hope your suggestion is accepted by the Chair, because I think that's the way this committee ought to do business. Unfortunately, it hasn't done business that way with this administration. There has never been any attempt to resolve these things informally. Fights are picked, show hearings are had like this one, and that's what leaves us where we are today. I want to sort of go to the very premise of this particular show hearing, which is that you're giving some kind of special preference to the wind energy industry over fossil oil and gas. And it does seem to me that that's rather preposterous on its face, but let's just review some of the context of that. You have 825,000 oil and gas wells in the United States versus 48,000 wind turbines, correct?
Correct.
And given that overwhelming size advantage, magnitude difference, you're nevertheless investigating 17 wind facilities versus 20 oil and gas operations, correct?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
And of the 17 wind facilities you've investigated, you've referred 7 of those to DOJ, and that certainly would suggest, when those numbers are considered, that you're actually enforcing much more vigorously relative to the size of the wind industry than you are against the fossil fuel. Wouldn't that be a natural conclusion?
That's
just
a
on the numbers
reasonable
alone?
Conclusion, sir.
All right. Well, thank you for your testimony, and I'm sorry that it has to be in the manner of one of these gotcha hearings instead of the way people ought to do business with each other.
Would the gentleman yield?
Certainly.
For the record, the gentleman asserted that there hasn't been patience or cooperation from the committee's standpoint. For the record, I just want to say this. Everything that was in that subpoena that we asked for on March 11th has been asked for before. There's nothing new, regardless of what the director has said. There is nothing new that has been asked. Secondly, I want to make this point. We started this process in May of 2013. May of 2013. The first response we got from the Fish and Wildlife was in September. Now, that does not suggest to me that that is cooperation and trying to work in a collaborative way. I'm willing to work in a collaborative way. But when I look at the evidence and see this slow rolling that's even acknowledged in the response to me, I get pretty frustrated. I thank the gentleman for yielding. I recognize